You've probably run into this at least once in your life. A kitchen knife getting dull after a long time of use is nothing unusual. That's exactly why I decided to make a proper guide on how to sharpen a kitchen knife the right way. But before that, I'll test it with this dull knife of mine first, so everyone can see I didn't stage the results beforehand. And as you can see, the blade clearly isn't sharp. Even when I press down hard, it only tears the paper instead of making one clean, smooth cut. Alright, this still may not prove much. Part of the reason is that the paper I prepared here is thicker than regular paper. So I'm going to switch to cutting a tomato instead. It's a very sensitive test. If the blade has even a decent level of sharpness, it should slice through easily. Even though I tried to cut as carefully as possible with proper technique, all it did was crush the tomato instead of slicing through it normally. So now everyone can clearly see the current condition of this dull knife I have here. From this point on, you won't need to worry about it anymore, because everything can be fixed with this little trick. First step, I'll start with a flap sanding disc. This type of disc is great for controlled sharpening, smoothing the edge evenly and removing worn metal without biting in too aggressively. For now, this is only the initial refining stage, not the main sharpening step yet. And before turning the machine on and doing the real sharpening, take a moment to practice the motion first so you get used to the technique. Or you can watch how I do it as a demo first to avoid sharpening the wrong way. After finishing the initial sharpening stage, I'll move on to the next step with a whetstone. This stone has two sides with grit levels of 1000 and 3000. We'll use them in order, starting with 1000 grit first because it helps refine the edge, smooth out the rough marks left from the earlier step, and rebuild a cleaner cutting line. After that, we'll switch to the 3000 grit side to polish the edge further, making it smoother, sharper, and more consistent. Another helpful tip is to remember to spray a little water onto the whetstone to keep the surface working smoothly, reduce friction, and help the blade sharpen more evenly. After completing the final sharpening stage, I'll move on to cleaning this knife with WD-40 multi-use oil. It helps loosen grime, remove leftover residue from sharpening, push out moisture, and leave the metal surface cleaner and better protected. What a clean cut. I'm barely using any hand pressure, yet the edge moves through with a smoothness you can feel immediately. There's no dragging, no hesitation, and no need to force anything. The blade simply follows the line the way it should, steady and controlled from start to finish. That is usually the first sign that the sharpening was done properly. You can also notice how consistent the movement is. Instead of catching or slipping, the edge keeps its path naturally, which makes every motion easier and more precise. When a knife reaches this point, the work becomes lighter on the wrist, quicker to handle, and far more comfortable to use. Small tasks feel simple and bigger tasks feel less tiring. What I like most is that the result doesn't come from luck or expensive tools. It comes from taking the right steps, keeping the angle steady, and giving each stage enough attention. A dull edge can feel frustrating, but with the right method, it can come back sharper and smoother than many people expect. So if your knife has been struggling lately, this is your reminder not to give up on it too soon. Sometimes it only needs a little care, a little patience, and the proper technique. Once that edge returns, you'll feel the difference right away in every single pass.